Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Salesforce Reporting and Automation Basics. My name is Trevor, and I'll be helping out with today's session. Today we're joined by Garrett Farwell, who has spent the majority of his career as a member of the technical and account management teams in the support department at Salesforce. Recently, Garrett has earned 3 years of instruction experience, focusing on the administrator, developer, reporting, and end-user roles, as well as other Salesforce University courses. Garrett, thanks for joining us today.
Welcome, Trevor. Thanks for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. Thanks for joining the webinar today. I wanted to review, as we get started here, our agenda of what we're out to accomplish and take a look at today. I'd like to start by talking about the Lightning Process Builder and what that tool is, just some basics about it, as well as a few examples of what it can automate in Salesforce. I'll do a quick demo on how the Lightning Process Builder works, how we create information in Salesforce, and how it can assist in automating processes in our application so that we don't have to go in and manually take any action. And then we'll move to looking at reporting. I'll talk about some of the basics of reporting in Salesforce, some of our reporting formats, how we generate some very simple reports in Salesforce, and some of the frameworks and steps we want to be aware of when we do that. And then I'll give a quick demo and create a report here on the webinar, show everyone what that looks like. And then hopefully we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes of questions and answers at the end of the webinar today. So let's start with our Lightning Process Builder. The Lightning Process Builder in Salesforce is a couple years old. It's one of our newer automation tools, and it lets us automate business processes using a visual interface that looks a lot like Visio, if anyone's worked in the Microsoft Process Automation tool. It has the diamonds, and it has the rectangles, and it has the ability to connect and to build out a process using a visual interface. A process has multiple, usually, but doesn't have to, have multiple criteria nodes. And when we refer to criteria nodes, we're referring to those diamonds in the screenshot there on the right-hand side of the slide. So each of those will set whether that process continues or whether it stops, and what about the information we're running that process against should have it continue through to process the actions we've specified for that specific node. So if that node evaluates to true, we go across and move off to the right, and we take the actions that are specified along that branch of the criteria node. We can have immediate actions, and we can have scheduled actions take place along each of those criteria nodes. A process can also evaluate to the next criteria. So in some of our previous automation tools we had available in Salesforce, we were only evaluating one set of criteria and then taking some specified actions. Now with the Lightning Process Builder, we can take a set of specified actions and then look for some additional criteria or something else about that data we're running that process on to continue to act on that information. We also have the ability to versionize our processes, which is new in the Lightning Process Builder, or is new as a part of this tool. And the value in that is for us as administrators, or for anyone configuring a process in Salesforce, to be able to see what that process was in the past and how it is currently automating a business process for us. So that history can sometimes be important to understand the buildup of how a process has come to exist in its current form. A couple of examples that I'm going to highlight here for the Lightning Process Builder, some of the things that it can automate in Salesforce. First off, it can send an email reminder to an account team if a high-value opportunity is still open 10 days before the specified close date. Now in Salesforce, an account team is a group of users that are specified to help support a specific account. Here at Salesforce, we have account executives from a sales perspective, we have sales engineers, and we have technical representation from our technical support team or from an implementation team, and all of those users are assigned to one or more accounts to ensure the success of that account. And if there is a high-value opportunity that the sales team is working, that account team might need notification of that high-value opportunity to ensure that we're all on the same page and understanding what's going on with that account. So 10 days before that high-value opportunity is supposed to close and is supposed to be signed by the customer, we want to make sure that we inform the account team of that transaction. So that's one way the Lightning Process Builder automates a process in Salesforce. Moving on to the next one, we can update all addresses on child contacts when a billing address is changed on an account. So what that means is in Salesforce we have accounts and we have contacts, and accounts are the usually organizations or corporations that we do business with, and the contacts are the individual people who work for those corporations or those organizations. And we want to make sure that we automate anytime we change address information on the account, that it also rolls down to and modifies all of the contacts' mailing addresses, because if these contacts work for a specific company or organization and their mailing address changes, so too would the contacts' work address change as well. We can create records and notifications based on stages of an opportunity and schedule follow-up tasks that execute based on changes to those records. So I'm going to show you just a sort of a brief process toward the end of this portion of the webinar that shows you what I'm referring to there. It allows us to, as a sales professional, is moving an opportunity, in other words, the potential to close business with a customer, it allows us to have certain tasks be performed or be assigned to one or more individuals as that sales opportunity is progressing through the sales funnel. So we can automate that part. We can also automate changes to the record. So as that opportunity progresses and as that sales professional is changing information on that record, we can have additional fields or additional data be populated automatically. We can also create an order record with the data and opportunity and associate it to an account when the opportunity stage changes to close one. So if a sales professional closes some business with a customer, we want automatically an order record to be created, because when a customer purchases something from us, we always have an order record to ship or to begin the fulfillment process of whatever product that customer has purchased from us. And rather than having that sales professional or somebody from our sales operations team go in and manually create that order information, the Lightning Process Builder helps us automate the creation of that order record. And it can take data from the account, it can take data from the opportunity, or in other words, from that device we use to track that sales professional's ability to sell whatever that product or service was to that customer. We can take information from all those other touch points to effectively create that order record. So some of what a Lightning Process Builder can do, actually all of what a Lightning Process Builder can do here. We have our actions on the left-hand side, and then we have the description of those actions on the right. First, the Lightning Process Builder can create record information. Previous to Lightning Process Builder's existence, we had to use Apex, we had to use some programmatic channels to create record information in Salesforce. But what's really nice about this being available in the Lightning Process Builder is our ability to declaratively, in other words, through the setup tree and through clicking and configuring from clicks in the application, we can have record information get created. Similar to the example I just provided, when we close business, we have an order record created. We can update records, so we can update fields on a specific record or on multiple records, or even down to related records as well. So as users in the system are changing information, I can have related information change, or I can even have information on that record or within the same scope get changed automatically. I can also send an email, and the wording that we have here says using an email alert. There's nothing more alerty about it other than just an email itself, but we use email templates and we use automated tools to send that email, and it's a great way to automatically have notifications go out and emails go out whenever information is changed in Salesforce. For those who are familiar with our chatter product, you're able to post to chatter. You're able to post to a user, a group, or a record feed to indicate something maybe about that record, some specific information that you want to communicate out to just the followers of that record, a specific grouping of users, or maybe to an individual user. We often see this as a congratulatory tool when a sales rep closes some big business with a customer, that gets socially posted out within our organization to congratulate them. We can also use a quick action. A quick action is a tool that's object specific or global in nature. It allows us to create a record, update a record, or log a call. And a quick summary of a quick action would be if I am working in the Salesforce system and I want to be able to just click a button to be able to have a series of actions be performed, a quick action is a great tool for that. And it differs from the Lightning Process Builder in the sense the Lightning Process Builder happens automatically behind the scenes, whereas a quick action is a series of changes that can take place after the manual asking of those changes being taken place. In other words, clicking that button or that quick action. We can also submit records for approval. So we can have records meet certain criteria and then get moved into an approval process and promoted through that process to ensure that they are run up the chain of command so that everyone is aware of the fact that maybe a certain discount percentage is being given on a product or service, and we'll need a manager or a VP's approval for that to occur. We can also launch a flow, and a flow and the Lightning Process Builder are actually very closely related. We'll see some of the wording actually get intertwined between the two features, but a flow essentially lets us do some very declarative, very complex automated logic, sometimes a little bit beyond what a flow, what a Lightning process can do, but it allows us to automate some really neat things in Salesforce, as well as to have a user interface component to it. So it can be launching, a Lightning process can launch a flow and to launch some additional complex logic. It can also call Apex. So a Lightning process can take place and then essentially call some programmatic logic, some code in Salesforce to take something more complex from a logic perspective, or maybe do some sort of a call out or integrate with another system. The Lightning process can rely on Apex for those capabilities. Some more information about the Lightning Process Builder, a little bit, some general information, and then what we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about scheduled actions. So processes can be launched from changes on a record or when invoked by another process. So when I change information in Salesforce, I can have a Lightning process kick off. Or I can daisy chain Lightning processes together. I can say when process A runs, I want process B to run as well. I can call Apex code to communicate with other systems, very similar to the example I gave in the previous slide. So if I need to integrate with maybe some sort of document management system, or maybe integrate calling another order fulfillment system and indicating that record information has been changed in Salesforce, Lightning process can help couple that logic with Apex. We can reorder criteria in the process by dragging and dropping it. This is also really neat. I can change how my Lightning process is configured, and I can change what actions take place, all by clicking and dragging and moving those criteria nodes around. It's a really nice way to move around that logic and make the changes to a process a very agile one. We can reuse names when creating a new process version. So as I mentioned, there's this idea of versioning in the Lightning Process Builder that allows us to see the history of a process and how that's led up to how we currently automate a specific process. And I can reuse the names for those for that Lightning process as I go through the versioning of it. Scheduled actions can have multiple scheduled actions per criteria node. I'll show some examples of that here shortly. In other words, I can send emails, I can set tasks, I can do multiple actions as a part of that process being kicked off. Scheduled actions cannot be used in a process that evaluates every time a record is created or edited. So that's true. It's something that you have to keep in mind with the Lightning Process Builder. I cannot kick off a scheduled action if that Lightning process is going to initiate every time record information is changed. Scheduled, let's see, admins receive an email alert if a user who starts a process becomes inactive and scheduled actions fail. So a little bit about where you might get into that scenario. If I configure a Lightning process and it involves a user, and the Lightning process is going to set off a series of scheduled actions that are going to take place in a month or 2 months, and between the time that process starts and those actions taking place in a month or two, the user that are involved in those actions becomes inactive. Well, then there's nothing, we can't set a task for that user, we may not be able to send them an email. Because they're inactive in the system, we're going to fail those actions and say, well, we can't complete this because the user's no longer active in the system. So we now send, didn't used to, but now send an email to the configure the admin and whoever configured that process to alert them of that issue. You can also find those pending process actions in the setup tree under that orange path right there, setup, create, workflow, and approvals, flows, and then paused and waiting interviews. So as I mentioned a second ago, sort of flows in the Lightning Process Builder really do intertwine. So if you want to see all those scheduled actions, that's where you'll go to see those in the setup tree. So let's do a quick demo of what the Lightning Process Builder is capable of. We're going to keep it fairly simple and fairly straightforward. And I'm also going to show you what I think is a very effective way of using the Lightning Process Builder to automate something very simple. So here I'm in my developer org, and I'm going to create a new position here. It's a new position that we're recruiting for example. So we want to have a new QA manager, let's say. So a new QA manager. So I'm going to fill in some information about this position that we are recruiting for. I'll put in a pay grade. We'll put in a hiring manager. All I do is just start typing a name in there, and we'll say that person is going to be me. That hiring manager is me. QA manager, we'll make sure we have high quality products. So I'm going to scroll through here and make sure that I fill in all the required information, and just in the interest of time, we won't fill in everything that this record is asking for. Make sure that this is a high priority, and the status is this is a new position we're recruiting for. And we're going to be opening that record today, or opening that position today. And we're going to close it, let's say, in a couple of months. That person's start date will be, how about sometime next week? And I'll go ahead and save that record. So again, just filling in some information here and creating that new position record. So we're hiring for that QA manager. Now what the Lightning Process Builder has done behind the scenes is it has automatically for us created some related information. It's created an interviewer. So since we're hiring for the QA manager, someone will be interviewing at some point in time candidates for this position. So related to it now is this interviewer record. If I click on and drill into this, it's a very simple record. It just shows who's going to be interviewing this for this position. In other words, what employee is going to be interviewing candidates. And I'm going to be interviewing candidates here for the QA manager position. So I could enter some additional details here around me as the interviewer and what my maybe feedback was about that candidate or what my role is during the interview process. So this interviewer record was created automatically and related to the QA manager position by the Lightning Process Builder. So let's take a look at the Lightning Process Builder here. I've got that open in another tab. And here I've got my Create Interviewer Record Lightning process. So if I click on and drill into that in a little greater detail, it's again a very simple process, but it just starts by looking at position information, right, position records, and it looks to make sure that the hiring manager field is not blank. If it's not blank, then an interviewer record is created, and it's in the immediate actions category here. We want that interview record created as soon as that position record is created. And you noticed that just a minute ago in the demonstration that interviewer record is created as soon as the position record was created. There was no delay in that. It was not a scheduled action. So just a very, very simple example there of a Lightning process automating my ability to input interviewer information when I open a new position. If I go back to my process list here and I look at all my processes, another one I wanted to show everyone revolves around the high value opportunity. So this is a Lightning Process Builder demo that you can actually find in the help and training of Salesforce. In our help and training portal, it outlines what you're seeing, what I'm demonstrating here. But to show you at a high level what this does, and to show you also an example of a Lightning process that's a little more complex, I start by looking at opportunity information. In other words, the information that sales reps are generating around who they're selling to and what that sales cycle, where they are in that sales cycle. So it looks at that opportunity information. It evaluates the opportunity to see if it's a high value deal. And a high value deal is anything that has an amount over $10,000. So anything over $10,000 we consider a high value deal. And if it's a high value deal, we will create a contract automatically. We'll inform the sales team. We'll notify the VP of sales immediately. And then we have some scheduled actions, something that's going to take place 6 days after that deal is modified. We're going to set a follow-up task for the owner of that information to say, hey, take a look at this. Make sure that we're following up with the customer appropriately on a specified time interval so that we don't, this high value deal doesn't slip through the cracks. If it's not a high value deal, or rather if it's a deal that got lost, so we had a high value deal but we didn't end up winning the business, we're going to notify the VP of sales. Maybe the VP of sales wants to follow up on that, understand why we didn't win that deal, and understand how we can be a little better at winning that in the future. If it is a high value deal and it falls within, we want to give them a quote of some kind. It's been closed. It has some specific criteria that indicate we want to provide that customer with a quote. We'll set some scheduled actions to take place. So 3 days after the modification of that high value deal, we'll set a follow-up task to make sure that we provide that potential customer with a quote of what our products or services would entail, what the cost of all of that would entail. So we have some scheduled actions to take place 3 days after that. So a little more of a complicated process, but as you can see, we could continue on and add additional criteria and continue to automate what we want to happen when a high value deal is entered into the system. So I'm going to, for our next demo, set us up to be in the sales application. So I'm going to go ahead and get my org my application ready for that. So that's a quick overview of the Lightning Process Builder, some of its capabilities, and just getting your feet wet with what's possible with that tool. Next, we're going to go on to talk about reporting. A lot of people who come to my courses are very interested in reporting. It's certainly one thing to get data into Salesforce, but some real value is found in being able to report on that information and be able to make business decisions based on what data we're generating. So reports are not like any other, or probably are like a lot of other tools you've seen in other systems where we want to analyze and aggregate data. We want to view that data in different ways. We want to view it from different angles. We want to be able to filter that data and see it differently depending upon who we're presenting it to and depending upon who the consumer of that information is. So Salesforce reports allow us to do that. They allow us to run different reports, use different formats, use different frameworks to present the information that we need in a variety of different ways. So we're looking to try and analyze information in the system, and what's great about our reporting tool is if you have it housed in our system, you have it in Salesforce, you have it in our application, you can report on it. So it can be custom information, it can be standard information, it can be in a variety of forms. So we can have text information, we can have currency information, date information, any of that we're collecting in Salesforce is very reportable. Our report formats in Salesforce help us to view the data differently depending upon how we want that data presented. Now, a tabular report is one of the 4 report formats that we have in Salesforce. A tabular report is just a very simple list of information. Just give me all of my customers and their names and their billing address. Give me all of the accounts or corporations that I work with and give me their billing address or their industry. I just need a very simple list that grand totals that information. So how many records, how many pieces of information show up in that list or in that report. That would be a tabular report. We're going to go into some detail on that here in just a minute. The summary report allows us to have that simple list, but to divide that list into groupings for subtotals. And then our matrix report allows us to have a report that presents data with multiple groupings on the column and multiple groupings on the row. And the matrix report is a great report format to do so that you don't have to export data out of Salesforce and use an Excel pivot table. For those of you who have been doing that, taking the data out and running pivot tables, the matrix report should help you with that. Now, truth be told, there are 4 types of report formats in Salesforce. The last one is a joined report, and as the name indicates, it's our ability to join multiple reports together and see all of that in a single user interface, and it is currently only available in Salesforce Classic, and I've been demonstrating and will continue to demonstrate the application in our new user interface, the Lightning Experience. So hopefully coming to us and available in the Lightning Experience soon, but for now that joined report, because of its user interface complexity of bringing multiple reports together, it is not available in Lightning yet. So the first report, as I already previewed a little bit, here's that tabular report. It gives us a very simple list of information with a grand total. It doesn't do any subgroups. It doesn't do any summarizing. It doesn't do any column or row grouping. It doesn't do anything fancy. It's very simply just a list of information. And this works great if you're trying to come up with a mailing list where you're going to do a marketing mailer to some customers, or you want to just see a simple list of all the deals that a sales rep or an account executive is working on. I want to see a simple list of the account information we have in the system. A tabular report is great for that. It's simple, and it gives you a grand total of all the information that you're looking at, how many records are in that returned report. The summary report is a little more complex, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility in viewing data. So it does provide that list of information. So at its heart, a summary report is a list of information, but it allows us to go a little further than just a list. It allows us to do groupings, it allows us to do sorting, and it allows us to do subtotaling. So those three things mentioned at the top in the summary report definition there. So grouping, sorting, and subtotaling. So my groupings are over here on the far left. You can see here that we're grouping in this example by role. So we're probably grouping customer information by who owns it or by who's responsible for it, so that we can see our Ted Kim or Fumiko. We can see this information, and we can group this by a role. This actually looks like user information, so we're grouping all these users by their role. And it will also give us how many users fall into each of these roles. So you can see for accounts receivable, we have 2 users, 2 records, in other words, 2 users. For APAC marketer, we have 1, and so on and so forth. Down here to APAC sales rep, we have 8 records, in other words, 8 users being returned that are grouped into this APAC sales rep role. I can also click on these column headers to sort the data that's returned in this summary report from A to Z or Z to A, much like you do likely in Microsoft Excel, where you'll be where you have rows of information that you can sort alphabetically, A to Z or Z to A. So it does do that sorting for us simply by clicking the column header. And a matrix report is, and actually one more thing I want to mention about the summary report. A summary report is probably the most common report format run in Salesforce. I think it's a good blend between simple and complex. It kind of sits between our tabular and what I'm about to introduce in the matrix report. So it's a good way of viewing information, summarizing information, grouping information, but not feeling probably a little overwhelmed by how that data is formatted. I find that sometimes when we look at matrix reports and start to work with matrix reports that people do get a little overwhelmed, and it can seem like there's a lot getting reported on, and sometimes it's difficult to see exactly what we want to be seeing in that report with a matrix report. But breaking it down, it is actually a very helpful report format. It summarizes data in a grid. So we have horizontal and we have vertical groupings, also known horizontal as the row and vertical as the column. So we have the ability to group information both horizontally and vertically that provide totals for both rows and columns. And that's probably one of the big reasons why you would be using a matrix report, is if you want totals both across the row and down the column. That's one of the keys for using the matrix report and using this report format. So if I look at this report format here, I can see down the column I have all of my opportunity owners. So down here I've got in this column all my opportunity owners. So these are probably all my sales reps here. And then across the columns here, I have the different months that all of their deals fall into. So what deals they're working with different customers, the count of those deals, and then the total amount of those deals by sales rep that fall in a specific month. So I can go across and say, all right, for November, Ben Matthews has 1 deal totaling $90,000. And I can continue to look across that row for Ben to say he has 3 deals that fall in December that total around 261. So I can see that here, and I can also see it as I continue through that report in a total form. So I can see that Ben, for all the information that's returned in this report, he has 5 deals that he's working, probably five opportunities that he's working and that he owns, and then that totals 376 here. That's the total for all of the information that we've seen across this row. So I get the grand totals across the row there, and unfortunately I can't, down at the very bottom, it's cut off in this screenshot, but at the very bottom I would get grand totals in these columns as well. So that's the benefit of the matrix report format. I get the totals across at the very end of the row, and I get them at the very end of the column. So seeing them both by month, the totals by month, and then the totals by opportunity owner. So the opportunity owner totaling at the end of the row, and then the month totals at the very bottom of the column. And it'll also show me the overall amounts here at the very top of the report, the total records and the total amount of all the deals or all the opportunities that are returned in this report. So when I'm building a report in Salesforce, what I have to do is I have to think about how I'm going to build that report appropriately so that it returns the data that I'm looking for it to ultimately return. What we're seeing in this slide is a great overview of the steps you should take and the things you should think about as you're creating a report in Salesforce. The first one is the object or objects that you're going to be reporting on. The objects that you report on really set the framework for that report. And if you need to think of objects a little differently, you can think of them as the tabs across the top of Salesforce: accounts, opportunities, and contacts. When I'm running a report, we're really starting at this stage by asking ourselves, do I want just account information when I report? Do I want just contact information when I report? Do I want just opportunity information? Or do I want a blend of those objects in some form or fashion? Do I want to be reporting on accounts and contacts, or opportunities and accounts? Do I want to pull multiple objects together to run that report? So that's step one. That's setting the report type. And then number two there is scope. So whose records? Okay, so what information do I want to see? In other words, people own information in Salesforce. Do I want to see all of my information, or maybe if I have access to it, someone else's information in my report? And do I want to time bound that by something? Show me only information for this calendar year. Show me only information for this calendar quarter, for this fiscal year. We have a lot of different ways to bring that information together into the report based on a time frame. And then columns are very simply fields. What fields do I want to see? So do I want to see my stage if I'm running opportunity information? Do I want to see close date? What fields do I want? And that's a very configurable part of a report. You'll see here in just a minute I can add and subtract fields as I see fit. And then I select the format. Do I want my tabular? Do I want summary? Or do I want a matrix formatted report? And that merely just changes the presentation of the data in the report and allows me to use different tools within that report to present that information, like groupings and summaries and column level summaries and row level summaries if it's a matrix report format. So I select my format, and I can change my format sort of on the fly. If I'm using a matrix report format and I want to change over to summary, there's no issue with that. It obviously changes the presentation of that data, but it's a very technically possible and something that people do quite often if they need to see that data differently. I also can set groupings. So if I'm using something other than a tabular report, I can group that information by maybe owner, maybe by a date, really any field information we're able to group by. We can also summarize numerical fields. So anything numerical in Salesforce, I can go through and ask for a total, or a grand total or a subtotal. A subtotal shows up at the grouping level, and then a grand total shows up at the very top of the report. Filters allow us to ensure that we return exactly the information that we want in that report. Maybe I want to filter if it's opportunity information by stage. Maybe if it's account information, I want to filter by a specific zip code or a specific state. We can set filters to ensure we return only what we want to see. And lastly, if you want to see some sort of visual presentation of the data returned in that report, I want to see a chart, in other words. I want to see a line chart, a bar chart, a donut, a funnel. I'm going to show you a couple of examples for visualizing that information. So let's do a quick demo on creating a report in Salesforce. Let me get back over to the application here, and I'm going to click on my Reports tab. And I have a bunch of reports that are already here as a part of my organization. So what I would encourage everyone to do is take a look at what you have available to you, and maybe there's a report that meets your needs right off the bat just by scrolling through that list. But to take this a step further, what I do want to demonstrate is how to create a new report. So in the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to click that New Report button. And here, my first step is I'm going to select my report type. Right? This is the framework I was referring to a little earlier. What object or objects do I want to be reporting on here? And you'll notice it'll give me some options here in this report type, depending upon what is related to what in Salesforce. So anything that's got a relationship, opportunities and contact roles, partners, competitors, for example, I know there's a relationship between that information. So I can report on it and use that report type. I'm going to keep things simple, and I'm going to just use the opportunities as a report type as I build my report. So I'll select it, and then I'll go ahead and click Create. So this starts me off in the report builder, and it gives me the quick preview of what that report's going to look like. And there are some fields in here that I don't really care about having on my report. They're not important to what I'm ultimately trying to report on. So a little trick, if you hold down the Control key on a PC, I think it's the Command button on a Mac, you can highlight multiple fields across the top here. And once you've done that, you let go of that key and you click hold and drag, and you can bring multiple fields off of that report. So these are the fields that I'm left with that I'm interested in. So I'm going to start first by establishing those fields. I don't have to start there. What's nice about the report builder is I could start with the filtration. I could start with adding or subtracting fields. There's really no science to that. Just ultimately trying to get to where I need to be once I run the report, which I'll show you here in just a minute. At the top here, the filters, and I just changed the range up here to all time. I want to see all data, and I don't want to time-bound the results of this report by any sort of time frame. Now here would be a pretty good example of a tabular formatted report. It's just a simple list with a grand total at the bottom. But what I want to do is demonstrate the summary report again, because I think it's the most often used report in Salesforce, report format in Salesforce. So I'm going to switch over to summary, and I want to group by this stage field here. I want to see what deals my sales reps are working by stage. So I want to see that grouped by stage. And very simply, all I do is click, hold, and drag on that stage field, and I drop it there in that sort of purple bar grouping area, and that then sets my grouping. What I also want to do is I want this subtotaled by amount and totaled by amount. So if I click the little down arrow there, I'm going to summarize this field, and I'm going to summarize it by checking that sum checkbox. Notice I could also do an average, a max, or a min if I so choose. But here, I'm just interested in summarizing this information. So I'll check sum and click apply. And this report looks pretty good. This is a nice preview of what the report's ultimately going to look like if I scroll through the preview pane over here. So I'm going to save this report by clicking save in the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to call it opportunities by stage. And I'm just going to, for now, save it in my personal custom reports. What opportunities are my reps working by stage? So this is a best practice. Certainly take it or leave it, but when I am inputting a report description, I input a question that is answered by running the report. So I'll go ahead and click Save there and save that report into that folder. And then once I've saved it, I'm able to hit the Run Report button and bring that report to life. So here I can see on the left my stages, so all the opportunities grouped into the prospecting stage. There are 9 of those. I get my subtotal here at the bottom, and as I scroll through, I can see my different stages, the subtotal for each of those stages, and then at the very bottom I get my grand total, and I get my grand total for my amounts, and I get my grand total for number of opportunity records. I can also add a chart here, so if I click on the little chart button right there, I can have automatically created for me, here's my horizontal bar chart, but I could over here click on the little gear, I could edit that chart, and I could display that data however I choose by clicking on those different visualizations here. The donut, this is a line, this is a scatter, this is a horizontal or vertical bar chart, and I can hover over each of these and it will tell me what they are. Anything that's grayed out is not available based on how I've formatted the report. So some pretty cool visualizations for that data that we return in the report. So that's a quick reporting demo on just creating a very simple opportunity report in Salesforce. So turning it back over to you, Trevor, I think we're going to do some questions here to close out the webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. That was really great. So yeah, we're going to move on to take some questions from you guys right now. If you have anything you'd like to ask, once again, just type it into the questions pane and press send. We've already received a few as the webinar has been going on, so I'll address those first. So Garrett, the first question that I have here is, I've seen this a couple times, is how many processes can a person have in Salesforce? As in like
yeah, good question. So it's a lot, and it's an interesting limit. It is actually a combination of flows and processes that dictate that limit. So flows is something we didn't demonstrate here in the webinar, but it's another really cool automation tool in Salesforce that allows us to do even some more complex automation logic. So you can have 1,000 flows and processes total in your Salesforce org or in your Salesforce implementation. So 1,000, I believe, is one of those limits that's so high that if you're managing 1,000 of those processes, you've got quite a lot of work cut out for you. It's a very generous limit that I don't think too many of our customers have to worry too much about, especially since you can also versionize those flows, those lightning processes as well. So you can continue to use the same logic over and over again and evolve it rather than having to create a whole new lightning process. And also, actually, let me add to that a little bit too. So it's 1,000 total flows and processes, but it's the total number of flows and processes that you can have that are active and running at a time is 500. So it's half of that. So 500 total active and running, but 1,000 total that you can have and sort of activate or inactivate as you see fit, as you're automating and sort of sunsetting certain automated processes.
Great. Thanks, Garrett. And so I have another one here. So are there any limits then on filtering report data?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another good question. I didn't show too much about filtering in the report demo that I did. I made that report very, very sweeping and opened that up to just basically all opportunity information. But if I need to go in and filter that and say, well, I don't want to see all opportunity information, I want to see it in a certain stage or in a certain type, or I'm sorry, with a certain type or within a certain close date range, I can add what's called a field filter to do that. And I can have 20 field filters in my report. That is another limit that I believe is a pretty generous one. I don't see people running into needing or having 20 field filters being used in their report. I've seen as much as probably 18 or 19 and you can use something else called filter logic to help to dictate which of those filters are used kind of in what order and in a specified ands or ors or nots, kind of change the operator logic in there if people are familiar with how to do that or some of that wording. It's so 20's the limit. It's usually one people don't run up against very often. So 20 field filters.
20 filters, yeah. Let's see, I have another one here. Regarding report charts, is there a list anywhere where someone could find all the different kinds of report chart types? What kind of options are available?
Yeah, so I demonstrated a couple of those in the webinar there. I demonstrated the horizontal bar chart, the vertical bar chart. I think I clicked on the donut there. I may have quickly clicked on the funnel, but the total list is available in the help and training. You can probably even just search for it generally in Google because our help and training information is available there. But to give everybody the list, it's a bar chart, so that can be both horizontal and vertical. It can be a line, a pie chart, a donut, a funnel, or a scatter chart. So those are the ones. I can go through those one more time. It's a bar chart, either horizontal or vertical. Line chart, which I clicked on very briefly. It didn't work very well with the data we were looking at a minute ago, but it is possible. So a line chart, a pie chart, a donut, and those are two different things, pies and donuts, different things, a funnel, and then a scatter chart.
Thanks, Garrett. I think I found the list here. I'm just going to send it out to everyone in the chat window. So everyone, if you could just open up your chat window, you should see the link to different types of chart types in Salesforce. I'm just going to take one more question for you, Garrett. It's a two-parter. We have what is the difference between a process builder and a Lightning process builder? And is the Lightning process builder there to replace traditional workflows, or would you still use a traditional workflow with Salesforce?
Okay, great question. So the first part, let's decipher some of the wording and nomenclature around Lightning process and process builder and all that. Sometimes I think we've done a pretty good job of confusing people, or maybe I did, unfortunately, on the webinar with some of that terminology. So the Lightning process builder is the tool that we use to configure and create a Lightning process. So a Lightning process is what I showed in the webinar a minute ago, that has the diamonds and that has the criteria nodes that come off of there. That is the actual process, and the Lightning process builder is the tool we use to configure it. So when I say I'm going to run a process, I'm going to be running a configured Lightning process in the Lightning process builder. So hopefully that's a little bit clearer. But we've really interweaved a lot of terminology in there. I sort of slangly, if you will, I hear just people saying a process. I'm going to be running a process in Salesforce. Sometimes that can refer to a Lightning process, just sort of more generically. So normally when I hear out there anything that has to do with process, I'm associating that with being a Lightning process built by the Lightning process builder. And then the second question was about workflow and Lightning process. I get that question quite a bit. There isn't a lot that workflow is still king over that Lightning process isn't capable of doing. The only thing currently is an outbound message, sending an outbound message, so workflow can still do that using clicks and configuring that in the application, whereas in the Lightning process builder, when you're configuring an outbound message or doing something that involves an integration, you have to call Apex. So workflow is still a very nice declarative tool for outbound messaging, but that's really the only place that it's still a nice declarative tool and option to use. My advice is use the Lightning process builder whenever possible if you're thinking about automating something in Salesforce. It's our newer tool. And a good general rule of thumb is anything labeled lightning is something that we're more interested in, and we're developing at a faster rate than anything that doesn't have lightning associated with it. So workflow is certainly not going away. It's been a part of our application for, gosh, at least over a decade, and it's been a very powerful tool for a lot of customers for a very long time. But we are looking to try and sort of rationalize all the automation tools we have out there so that we can come up with one singular automation tool that helps customers to automate what they need to automate using declarative functionality. In other words, clicking and configuring that process through the setup tree. So I hope that answers your question. My advice is to stick with the Lightning Process Builder and a Lightning process whenever possible.
Great. Thanks again. So I think that's all the time we have for questions. For all of you who have asked questions, thanks so much for participating. Sorry we couldn't get to everyone, but Garrett has generously offered to for you to connect to him on LinkedIn. You can look him up. His name there is Garrett Farwell. There will also be, we'll be sharing this recording as well as a slide share link in the next few days, so you'll be able to see this presentation, and you'll be able to get a link directly to Garrett's LinkedIn. So if you have any more questions, you can contact Garrett or even reach out to us at Global Knowledge at contact@globalknowledge.com. To follow up with this webinar, if you guys are interested in learning more about Salesforce fundamentals, we do have a course coming up just next week, which you can find on our website, globalknowledge.com. The date of this course is June 20th, so now is the time to register if you're interested. We have another follow-up course that you might be interested in called Administration Essentials for New Admins. And again, these courses are relevant and a great way to expand on what you've learned today. So if you're interested, be sure to check those out. Finally, I'd just like to thank everyone who took the time to sign in today and listen to us. Garrett, thank you for this presentation. It was great. I know I've learned a lot. I hope everyone else has too. And yeah, thanks again, everyone. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.